What's up, noobs? Sorry for the lack of this content in the past. I've just been super busy, but here we are again with another Grey Knights Brotherhood Redesign video. This time we're going to be talking about the Wardmakers. So the Wardmakers, we all know them, we all love them. It's where some of the most renowned Grey Knights characters have ever come from. You've got Supreme Grandmaster Warlord Drago was a member of that. We have obviously Grandmaster Voldus, which leads it as the Warden of Librarius. We have Brother Captain Stern as well. And then I believe that even the original Supreme Grandmaster Janus had a very strong liking for this Brotherhood. So I want to get into a little bit about their lore. They are the Psychic Brotherhood in a Psychic chapter. So every Grey Knight we all know is a Psyker, and then the third Brotherhood, the Wardmakers, are the best of the Psykers within this best of the best chapter. They use so much of their power to confound their enemies and destroy them while also protecting themselves, and I want to make sure that the Brotherhood plays that way. The current state is their stratagem is Masters of the Word for 1 CP. In your command phase, you can select one Wardmaker's character, and then you get to swap out one of the Dominus powers that they know for one of the ones that they don't. This is not fun to me. I'm going to get rid of it and replace it with something else. Lore Master, this is their Warlord trait. Each time a psychic test is taken for this Warlord, if the result of that is an unmodified result of 8+, and it was greater than or equal to that power's warp charge value, your opponent cannot attempt to deny that power. I like this. This is getting towards what I'm thinking that, you know, the Wardmakers would really be known for, but I don't think it goes far enough, especially with some of the new books that we're seeing coming out right now. So I think there's a little modifications that we can do to make this better. Their psychic power is called Projections of Purity. It's a malediction, so it goes on an enemy unit, and then it has a warp charge value of 6. If manifested, you select one enemy unit within 12 inches of this Psyker, and until the start of your next psychic phase, that unit is not affected by the aura abilities from models in its own army. Again, I think this is good. I think this is right on track, but I think there needs a little bit something extra. So going back again to the design philosophy here, right? We want to make sure that this Psychic Brotherhood in a Psychic chapter is able to manifest all those powers and really show off that they control the Psychic phase. If the Psychic phase is your phase, I want you to read this, if this were in an actual Games Workshop book, and be like, wow, this is the Brotherhood for me. That's what I'm trying to do. So with that said, the passive bonuses that I would give them, first of all, they would all gain back the +1 to cast their powers that we lost when our 9th edition book came out. So they would still keep the +1 to deny that we have now, but they would gain +1 to cast. That's a pretty big buff, so I didn't want to go too much crazier, but their Aegis, all the hexagrammic wards on their armor that are imbued with psychic energy, and their ability to work together, I think would also give them a 5-up invul for all Psyker units. So this would include Dreadnoughts, this would include Strike Squads, this would include Interceptors. That would be turn 1 and 2, and then on turn 3, 4, and 5, I think that it makes sense that it would drop to a 6-up invul save. And then also, just like I did with all the other Brotherhoods, once per game per unit, pick one Wardmaker's core or Wardmaker's character unit to be in the Tide of Escalation. I love the tides. I wish that the book did more to like let us interact with them and see what kind of synergies they could have, and this is one of the ways that I think we can actually do that. So this tide is considered to be active along with the tide that the rest of your unit is in, and then this ability allows the tide to be used again that was previously used. Now that stratagem, I've changed the name to Psychic Tide Mastery. I've completely thrown the old one out. I don't think it's that good. I don't think it's that fun, but this is probably super fun. At the start of your command phase, you choose one Wardmaker core or character unit to be in a tide that the rest of the army is not in. Until the start of your next command phase, that unit is considered to be in that tide as well as the tide that the rest of the army is in. So far it seems like that passive bonus, right? However, this stratagem allows you to stack that tide with the other tide that the army's already in, and then also the tide that you can select once per game per unit for that unit to be in, explicitly allowing one unit per turn to be in 3 tides at the same time. So you can be in Tide of Convergence, Tide of Celerity, and Tide of Escalation all at the same time, just to see all those stacking buffs. This might be a little cheap for that kind of versatility, but I think this would be a really fun thing to throw in there, so you could really see what like a super powered psychic warrior unit could really do. The Warlord trait. I'm still calling it Lore Master, but I've changed it slightly. So the old one was simply that if the Warlord cast on an 8+, that it couldn't be denied. Now it is the Warlord and any other Wardmaker Psyker unit within 6 inches of it. So you can have a little bubble of people running around, casting, and as long as you're rolling high, it's all undeniable. Again, I want this Brotherhood to be the one that, like, if you are playing another Psychic army, you're like, oh my gosh, I do not want to play the Wardmakers. They are so tough. And this is one of those ways I think we can do that. So the new Psychic power, it's still called Projections Superiority, but there are some things that have changed. And this one's really neat, I think, especially with their ability to have units that are also in the tide of escalation frequently. So I upped the charge value from 6 to 7. I changed the targeting parameters so it must target one non-character. The range is the same, and then until the start of your next psychic phase, that unit is not affected by the aura abilities or psychic abilities of models from its own army. So if you see a big blob of Wraith Guard or something, and you know that your enemy's gonna put a big buff on it, you can actually target them with this and turn off any buffs for a whole turn. Super strong. And this is the kind of thing that your opponent is gonna have to play around and know that it's gonna happen. The relic. So again, none of the Brotherhoods originally had any relics. I am designing one for each and every one of these Brotherhoods, and for the Wardmakers, I have designed the Whispering Lavalier of Portent. And during your command phase, you select one Wardmaker Psyker Infantry, specifically Duns. Can't use this on Dread Knights, within 6 inches of the bearer, and then until the start of your next turn, that unit gains the following 2 benefits. 1, the selected unit is -1 to be hit in both range and melee, and then the selected unit takes -1 to all incoming damage to a minimum of 1 damage. Super strong defensive relic. And then a little bonus content for you. So Grandmaster Voldus, I think he got done dirty in the 9th ed book, and so I want to see his data slate buffed, and since he's currently locked to the Wardmakers, let's make him, you know, what he once was. So he can reroll 1 psychic test per turn in my fancy redesign. He cannot be denied if he rolls an unmodified 9+ anyway, so he basically gets the Lore Master, the old Lore Master trait for free just by being Voldus, and then he regains Knows 3, Cast 3, and Denies 3. In 8th, he knew 3, could cast 3, and deny 3, but he was brought down to Knows 3, Cast 2, and Denies 2 in the 9th ed book. So I'd like to see him buffed back up as well. So what does an example list look like? Well, this one, unlike my other videos, this one is built with the Nephilim changes, so just bear with me here. It's a battalion, 2,000 points, starts with 2 CP. HQs, I don't think you can have a Wardmakers list that doesn't bring at least a Librarian, so I brought a Mortal Wounds Librarian, but without Psychic Epitome, you could spend 1 more CP for 1 more Warlord trait if you wanted and give him it. I don't think it's really necessary personally. It's an extra couple like mortal wounds here and there, but I did give him the Artisan Nullifier Matrix. Then Grandmaster Voldus, I gave him the Lore Master Warlord trait. It's a little bit wasted because of what I just said about his new data slate, and he gets part of that by default, but the bubble of denies for everyone else seems super good, so we should bring that, and then he'll know Sanctuary, Gate of Infinity, and Empiric Amplification. And then I brought a Brother Captain. I didn't bring Stern specifically. I brought an unnamed one, but Unyielding Anvil for the OBSEC bubble, and then the Whispering Levelier of Portent as the relic to give those repeatable defensive buffs continuously, and then also warp shaping. Troops, I wanted to lean hard into the fact that we're going to have a 5-up invul for 3 turns out of the game, and then a 6-up after that, and so I leaned into 5-man strike squads here, all with swords. Hammerhand is amazing. The +1 to cast is going to make it even more amazing. You're going to have Hammerhand on a lot of squads a lot of the time, and they're going to be very deadly. For elites, I have 2 3-man paladin squads. They all have halberds except for the paragons, which have a hammer. And then I have a 4-man action monkey servitor squad who are just amazing for screening stuff out and doing silly actions. And then of course it's a Grey Knights list, so you're gonna have to have interceptors. So in this case I took 1 10-man all with halberds and 2 5-mans all with halberds. Halberds are still really good into the current meta because you're gonna see a lot of orcs and sisters and death guard, and that strength 6 without having Hammerhand from being a strike squad, the strength 6 is gonna make it so you're at least wounding on 3s if not 2s a lot of the time. And then in the heavy support slot, I had just finished talking to Jay. I just did an interview with him if you're curious, and he took a bunch of Razorbacks and he kind of changed my mind. They're actually pretty useful for the long range anti-armor threat. They get extra movement to interceptor squads, and then you can also move block and do other crazy shenanigans with them. And they're only 120 points right now with a twin last cannon, so not bad. With that out of the way, how would this army play? So there's a lot of text in front of you, but I'm gonna go through it anyway. The paladins are there because the 3 bases are actually super easy to deep strike into small areas. So you can take engage on all fronts or behind enemy lines, depending on the opponent, and then now you have just shoved paladins in their backfield, which are super hard to remove, and if they don't deal with them, they can cause a little bit of havoc as well. So you have them up there, they cast armored resilience. Obviously they're honored knights, so they don't get the +1 to cast, or they and they don't get any of the stratagems or anything. But with armored resilience, they are so hard to shift that they can just kind of sit back there and get you points. And then 1 or 2 of the strike squads are going to stay back with the servitors to screen out deep strikes, and then they'll do actions as well. And then there are 2 5-mans in the Razorbacks, which is going to keep them safe. They'll have an extra 3 inches of movement for 15 inches, which is super good. Later in the game, the Razorbacks can be shoved into like extreme melee threats just to slow stuff down, or you can use them to move block as well. The rest of the army is going to move up with support from all the various characters, and they're going to have a huge threat. They're going to have that Artisan Nullifier Matrix stopping any perils from happening, which includes any abilities that your enemies can do to you that causes you to have perils. This will just stop all of that. You're gonna have the 5-up invul, obviously. Then you're gonna have the Lore Master bubble for your casts. You're gonna have reroll 1s from Voldus as well, and then you're gonna have reroll 1s to wound from the Brother Captain. So anybody moving up with the HQ blob is actually gonna be very well buffed and protected. And then you also have the new relic from the Brother Captain that's able to make one unit pretty hard to kill. And then the Tide of Escalation and the Psychic Mastery Stratagem allows strikes and interceptors to be even more hardy than usual. Say you're in Tide of Celerity for your whole army to make some clutch charges, then you turn one unit into Tide of Escalation with the once per game per unit ability from the passives. Then you go ahead and you turn off their buffs from their characters. You charge in, and you're able to do a ton of damage. And then if you need to, you can also spend a CP and give them Tide of Conversion. That is what I think would be a super fun Wardmakers army to play, and a super fun grouping of abilities that would just make them an absolute nightmare on the table, and let you know that if you're going up against a Wardmakers list and you're a Psychic army, you're gonna have a bad time. Again, I apologize that it's taken me so long to get these out. I've also written up the one for the Silver Blades now, which only leaves me the Rapiers, and then of course I want to do one on what I think a nice Army of Renown would look like for the Grey Knights. So only 3 more videos left in this whole series. But thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all this stuff, share. There are links down below to various Discords that are very helpful. The Grey Knight one is there. There's also my own. Lots of excellent information in both of those places with some pretty nice people too. So thank you again, and don't forget to call your mother.